Hello, everybody. Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, whatever the case may be. I want to thank you for joining me. This is Pastor Tom welcoming you to another study in the Word, a very special time where today I'm going to go ahead and release some things on media that I've been waiting on because the timing just didn't seem right, but I believe the timing is right. I know that what I'm going to say to many will be controversial. I know that some people will have a hard time believing it, but I'm going to release it because what happens is you speak those things that be not as though they were before they happen. And it's very important that God's people or God's ministers or God's the ones God uses that way speak out the truth right now and not be afraid or back down because of persecution. Or some Christians, many Christians, I believe, are going to be very embarrassed in the next few months because of the stand that they took wrongly concerning some things concerning this new administration, the support they gave them, and so on. When they find out how really some of this stuff comes out, that is going to be very difficult for anybody, including the most those among us who are most understanding. So this is a difficult thing for me to share. It's not something that I'm just rejoicing in all of it, because some of it will be very brutally difficult. We're in for some difficult times, but at the same time, we're in for some glorious times. There's never been a time like this in history, and I think that's the main thing that you need to get a hold of. What the Spirit of the Lord is telling me is that we cannot compare this with anything else. What's going to happen is God, in a sovereign way, dealing with things that He has allowed for many years to go on, that He finally has decided, for whatever reason, at this particular time in history, to literally expose it, to bring it down, and to reset. And we're using that term a lot. People are using it on both sides of things, but to literally give us a new birth, if I can use that, of a move of God on earth for a season. Now, people need to understand that I'm not one of these guys who feels like, for everything's just going to get better and better and better. I know at the same time that the good things that I'm going to talk about, some of the good things are happening. There will be other things that are going to be very difficult and challenging, of course. We're living in the last days, and people are just the way they are. However, I also think that there's many people that do not understand that when God begins to move on a massive scale, like we've never seen before, just like you or I, that have been changed by the power of God. And we know that power of God because we've experienced it. A whole nation, literally, the majority of the people, so to speak, can come under that. And that has happened before in our nation, but not in a way that I think it's going to happen now. I think it's going to be massive, not only in our nation, but around the world. It's going to be a wild time, but it's going to be also a very, very fun time. So the first thing I want to talk about today is a vision that I had that I'm entitling The Sinking of the Titanic Party Ship. Now, I know this is a spiritual vision, and there's probably a lot in here that I totally don't get all of it. I'm praying about it, but I felt like, I just needed to put it out there. Maybe some of you could comment on some of this too. But I've been around long enough to know that sometimes when the Holy Spirit gives us something, we don't know everything involved in it. And so, hindsight sometimes can be 20/20. In other words, after things begin to happen and you look back and you go, wow, that's what that is, and how it happened and how it's going to happen and all that I'm going to stay out of. I do know some things. I know that I'm totally convinced that there has to be a release of information, a gigantic release of information that will begin to happen. Maybe it'll happen all at once, maybe over a period of, I don't know how they'll do it. But I believe that that massive dump of information will cause this thing to get going, and it already is beginning. So I'm going to read to you the sinking of the Titanic party ship. So in the vision, I stood on the water looking at a huge ship. I was standing on the water in the ocean. I knew it was called the Titanic. Now, with that name, I knew where it was going, and so do you, but it's not the end we need so much to see, but the journey of this thing, okay? And we have to read between the lines on this. Sometimes God will say something, and then you can, I'll say it one way, but really there's a lot to it. And it goes back in history and so on. So these are interesting. This is a very interesting thing here. It says this: the next thing I knew, I was in a beautiful room, luxurious room, with all the features you would expect in a luxury liner. Or a luxury motel room. All right. I somehow knew to walk to the door and open it. Walking into the hall of the huge, marvelous ship, that reminded me of a very special, luxurious resort hotel. The hall, that I looked down, went as far as I could basically see down there. So then I walked up some stairs. I found some stairs, and I began to hear music and what sounded like a celebration. So I came to a door up these stairs. I opened the door, stepped out onto the deck. On the side of the ship by the door, there was a sign. I noticed a sign, and it said, Super Ship Titanic. Of course, I knew about the sinking of the Titanic, as you do. I hope, anyway, you know about that. But I also knew what I was seeing was a spiritual vision and revelation to show us some things relating to the time that we're living in. And so, on the deck, I looked and saw many people all over this huge deck. If you've ever seen a luxury liner, the things are huge, and there's a lot of people that can be on the decks doing different things, and this is what they were doing. They were frolicking around, playing games, dancing, singing. There was a band playing, swimming. Some of them were playing miniature golf, I noticed. Most of them were drinking very heavily, and you could tell that the party was in full swing. Then all of a sudden, I spoke in tongues and interpreted. And God said, take a walk and observe what I point out to you along the way. And so I began to walk. I started walking, and as I drew closer to the crowd of people on the deck, I began to recognize some of them. It seemed as if even though I was standing away from them, I could hear conversations up close. In other words, it was almost like God magnified their words so I could hear it up close. I realized this was the way God was pointing out things to me. Interesting enough, the first person I really noticed and saw was Joe Biden. He was there first, and he was speaking to another man. As I looked at this man, I realized I had a revelation. He was one of Joe Biden's handlers. That's the way the Lord said it to me. I then heard the conversation, some of it. And this man said, here is a list of what you must do and say this week. You must do these things exactly. Do you understand? And the guy was like, when he was saying it, it's almost like you're hearing somebody in the mafia or somebody with very threatening, Cousin Guido, that type of thing. Joe let out a stream of vulgar language that I wouldn't want anybody to have to listen to at this man and said, I've done everything you people have told me. And this man snapped, yes, and you will continue to do so or else. Now, in that or else, I began to get a revelation. He says, remember this, and I will remind you of what will happen if you don't. I don't know how, but somehow I began to realize that some of the threats were about Joe Biden's family Have you noticed that Hunter Biden, as an example, has not been even, hardly pursued, but he will be? All right. I'm just letting you know that some of Joe Biden's family had been threatened. All right. As well as Joe Biden himself. And, but it's really interesting because here it says, what goes on, but as the man walked away, I saw Joe really wasn't repentant over making the deals he made. In other words, there was some kind of deal he made with these people to be a figurehead in this whole thing that they're doing. I do not believe that Joe Biden was elected president. I believe that Donald Trump is still really the president. I believe that in fact, I know that the insurance or the election fraud was so bad. I'll talk about that later. And this whole thing was set up. But somebody had to stand up that was known enough to take a position. People like Hillary Clinton had run their time. Barack Obama had run his time. They couldn't do that. So they had to come up with somebody that most people would feel as like, well, he's known, he's been around a long time, so on and so forth, that they could use. And then it really didn't matter who it was, but he was under their control. So as this man walked away, I saw Joe really wasn't repentant over making the deal he made. He wasn't really repentant about it. He did it on purpose. He looked at it all as great benefit, worse some of the humiliations that he was being used for. In other words, he was going to be benefited, he thought, and his family would be benefited. And so he just went along with this stuff. You got to understand something right here. I realized at that moment by revelation that he was really just a figurehead. This guy is not important. Okay, he's just a figurehead. He is doing exactly what he is told to do. Way, way down the ladder of power he was. And the people really in charge of the plan. Joe Biden himself and Kamala Harris are way, way down the ladder of power on this thing. They are simply being used, and she's about ready to find out about it. And she's going to, I believe, she's going to come completely unglued when she finds out that she's just being used. Joe knows. He knows all about it. He signed on. So, way, way down the ladder of power. And the people really in charge of the plan, I realized he didn't mean much to their plan, except that he knew he would fit their purpose for a small season. I think he knew that knew that also, just for a small season is all this is. Also, I started feeling sorry for him because he's such a pitiful guy, But then the Lord said to me, "Don't feel sorry for that man." That's what he said to me. And, sometimes when I look at Joe Biden, I feel it's almost like you can feel sorry for the guy. He can't talk right. He's so old. He's, and all this, and you kind of, especially if you've had people with that, those kind of situations in your family, it's almost like you feel sorry for him. But the Lord said to me, "Do not feel sorry for him. He knew what he was doing when he signed the deal, and I have given him many opportunities to repent, to turn around, to get out of that, but he will not. Judgment for him is at the door." And that's what the Lord said to me. So that was interesting. All right. What does it mean, judgment's at the door for Joe Biden? I don't know, but we'll watch and see. All right. I also realized that the other people were paying no attention to him whatsoever. He wasn't even, you would think that somebody that's supposedly the president of the United States would be surrounded by, Secret Service and surrounded by all kinds of people, talking to him and trying to gain his, whatever it was. It was like he wasn't even there. It was like he was isolated and a joke. Is what it looked like to me. That he was the guy, it was almost like he was the guy in high school that everybody laughed at them behind their backs. that they all thought he was just, whatever it was, and didn't fit in. That's what I got out of that. It's very interesting. They seemed to understand he really wasn't important in their plan. Then as I looked into the crowd, there were many celebrities, okay, wealthy business people, politicians, mingling, drinking, many people involved in media, so on and so forth, and celebrating as they felt this plan keep coming up. Their plan had worked. But as I walked, I'm going to turn this over now. Sorry, but I've got to read this because I don't want to forget anything. As I walked along, I went by big rooms, some medium-sized rooms and some smaller rooms. I could see through the walls. It was like the Lord took the wall away and I could look inside them. In one of the small rooms, I saw Nancy Pelosi. She was not celebrating. She looked startled. She looked totally freaked out. She looked pale. It looked like she almost fainted and sat down. Mitch McConnell was standing there and had just handed her a paper with things written on it that seemed to shock her to the core. She had just read it. She then started shouting at Mitch. Her words were slurred, as she was clearly drunk. She screamed, "How could this have happened?" This is what she said. "How could this have happened? We have covered every possible scenario. Our lawyers assured us. The counsel assured me. This was foolproof, you said, but now this. What are we going to do now?" She yelped. Her face had turned beet red, and fear was etched in her face. Mitch said, "I don't know what else we can do. Maybe you can take this downstairs and ask." Interesting. But he also said one more thing. "As of right now, the backup plan for you to get out of the country if something like this were to happen that we had is not going to happen because they're everywhere and they're watching everybody." And I really got out of it. They know everything, So she stood up. She seemed to steady herself and said, "As much as I hate to do this, I'm taking this information downstairs." Apparently this information was new information that they had just got, okay? And she says, "I'm taking it downstairs." As she walked to the door down the hall, down the stairs, she stopped at an elevator and pushed a button to get in. So I followed her. I knew I had to follow her. Of course, this is a spiritual vision. She didn't see me or anything. I'm just watching this. She pushed a button to get in. I got in also, and I just knew I had to see this. I also knew by revelation that no one except certain people were allowed down where she was going. This was a secret, I said room, but really what was a secret, almost like the whole deck down there was secret. And only a few people were allowed access down there. You did not go down there if you didn't have access. Finally, the elevator stopped. She stepped out. I had a revelation. This was the lower level and the middle part of the ship. I stepped out and stopped as she walked down a hall toward the large doors. Now, two men looked to be guards, great big guys, stood guard at the door, mean-looking guys. I felt impressed to speak out a message in tongues, and I interpreted again. And this was what the Lord said. "I'm going to show you who and what is going on behind the scene, and I will allow the whole world to understand some things about this. Prepare for what you're going to see. Take courage." I went, "Oh, well, that's nice." So, as the guards opened the door to her, I quickly followed. As I entered into the door, I had to lean against the wall, because the second I entered in, it was hard to take. The place was filled with diabolical evil. Now, let me stop here. I'm going to just take take my liberty here to explain some things. You have to understand that a major portion of my ministry over the years has dealt with diabolical evil. People involved in diabolical evil at times, as well as people who had come out of the influence or were abused by diabolical evil, people that are demonized, people that were involved in some heinous things. So I know diabolical evil. I've stared in the face of many demonized people over the years, and I have experienced and seen diabolical evil, but not like this. This was like walking in to hell itself. It was hard to deal with. I looked up, and there were people dressed in red robes. First thing I saw was people dressed in these really weird-looking red robes. They were chanting and singing in a way that was almost making me sick. I wanted to throw up. The words and the things they were doing made me, it turned my stomach. It didn't scare me because in the vision I knew I was being protected by God, but it certainly was bizarre. It would have probably frightened the fire out of most people. I'm just going to tell you it that way. But it was making me ill. And I looked to the left, and the room was filled with many people. There's a room there filled with, and this is a big room now, filled with many people. Almost looked like a ballroom. But people were involved in the worst forms of debauchery. Now, I'm not going to get too explicit here, but I will say this. They were using children for things that were disgusting. They were actually involved in cannibalism. They were involved in rituals and ritual sex acts. Every kind of debauchery you can think of was going on in this room. And it was like they were totally taken over by the devil. It was almost like you would see a scene in hell. That these people were totally given over to this evil. I looked at a room on the other side, and I saw what looked like blood sacrifices taking place. And I noticed that Nancy didn't want to look in either room. I don't think she liked coming here, even though she understood what she would say, the importance of it. Nancy went through a hall. She just looked straight, didn't look in there. She didn't like it. I could tell. She went through a hall, again, down a way to another door, guarded by two more men. She was stopped. She said, "I'm here to address the High Council. I knew they were meeting today. I have some news for them. They must hear now." And one of the men said, "Wait here." And he went into the room. In a few minutes, he came back and opened the door. She walked in. I walked in behind her. And there was a large round table set with chairs in the room. Oh, man. This huge table. And other people were sitting behind the table in chairs. Okay, and there was a lot of people there. But I got the feeling that the people that were actually sitting around the high table were the ones that were in charge of this whole thing. And so this large table set with other chairs in the room. The room was full of people. I was shocked because I knew some of them. At the table, at the head of the table, or one of the places looked like the head of the table, sat Barack Obama. Next to him was this guy, George Soros, who we all know. And Hillary Clinton was on the other side. I saw two liberal justices of the Supreme Court. And as I looked around the room, I saw Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney, Bill Clinton, and the mayor of New York, the mayor of California, Gavin Newsom, and many politicians on both sides of the aisle. I saw people from the FBI. I knew they were from the FBI, the CIA, and even some who I knew by revelation used to work for Trump that were plants, as well as a guy named Bill Gates. I saw many clergy. The Pope was there. I saw many others. Most I did not know. By far, most of them I did not know or had not seen. And I couldn't remember, any of their names, even if I had seen them probably. But you get the point. It was at this point the Lord said to me, you will not be allowed to hear what Nancy says. You will hear of it later with all the rest of the people. When she was asked, okay, so in other words, I wasn't going to be able to hear what she said. I would have to find out with everybody else later. When she was asked by Obama, who, by the way, Barack Obama looked very angry and very like, why are you even, this is the way I got it. What in the world are you doing here, you little peon? Why are you bothering us? That type of thing. When she was asked by Obama what she wanted, I could tell he wasn't happy. She began to explain. She read from her paper, but it was like I went deaf. I couldn't hear. But I could see the reactions, but could hear, but I couldn't hear the info, but I could see their reactions. Okay. I could see as she spoke a look of shock come across the crowd in the room, all of them. They walked in, you could tell they were having a jubilation of a party. They were happy, everybody was drinking, there was merriment, but then after she said what she said, it was like they all got hit in the face with a wet rag, and their countenance changed. And I tell you what, I saw demons manifesting in people. It was wrong. It was so wrong. And so when she said this, I saw a shock come across the crowd in the room. Anger seemed to boil up. Some started shouting at one another. These people were shouting at one another, accusing one another of some, how come this happened and stuff like that. But finally, Hillary Clinton stood up and all the eyes went to her. It was then the sound came back on for me. And she said this effort to stop us will fail also. What's wrong with you people? Have you not all seen that our gods have always protected and covered us? And I got a revelation right then. I knew that all these people, they're involved in some of this stuff. They're prideful to the max. They really believe that they can do whatever they want and they'll never be exposed because they never have, even though people have tried over and over and over to expose the wrongdoings of them. They never have been exposed. They're untouchable in their minds. They feel like they're gods in their minds. And what's wrong with you people? Have you not all seen that our gods have always protected and covered us? Even when exposure was tried, it always failed. She laughed, a hideous, weird. We have people everywhere. We will call a high mass and we will send our spells. We will call on our lords and we will win this. They will give us the wisdom to deal with this. It was strong because it was like something took her over. It was strong. But the whole thing. She started to laugh like a crazy person in a mental institution would laugh. When she did this, the whole room started to laugh and yell at the same time with her, like a bunch of people in a mental institute. It's like one flew over the cuckoo's nest. It was just so bizarre and so evil and so weird. When she did this, the whole room started to laugh. Yes, we have also been hidden. We have never been totally exposed. And what I got out of that is only what they let people know about them. a little bit here, a little bit there. They do it on purpose, I think, to keep just I don't know, whatever. We have always prevailed, and we will now also. All these people had drinks. And Barack Obama said, a toast to our lords, a thanks for our victory. We will prevail. Christianity will fall. Our plan will work. And they all broke into an almost insane celebration. He said to Pelosi, go tell all your people not to be worried about this. A new and better plan will be forthcoming. Now go, we have much to do and much to talk about. Nancy turned around and looked, by me. She did not look convinced at all. She then disappeared, and I was all of a sudden on the deck watching the celebration again. I stopped and gave a message in tongues, and the words came to me. The sin of men, the pride of men, and the folly of Lucifer had given these all they had. I have decided their plan stops here. For my season, for my purposes of revival and harvest. I then walked around listening to the conversation as the people talked about the wonders of Lucifer. They called on and praised many demonic gods, and I knew by revelation they thought themselves as gods. I said that already, right? And I was really grieved about this. It just was so bizarre. All of a sudden, I was standing on the water of the ocean about a half a mile away from the ship. The celebration continued and even got louder. The people were clueless. They had no comprehension of anything except what they were doing. I saw a cloud form in the blue sky, totally blue sky. I saw a cloud form, and it formed over a little time into a fist. I knew it was God's fist. It represented God's fist. And all of a sudden, angels appeared all around and trumpets blew. Still, the party went on. They thought they were indestructible. But then the fist came down, punching a giant hole in the ship. Then screams could be heard as very quickly the boat began to sink. It was really interesting because fire broke out and every life raft exploded before they could get on it. No one was going to survive. As the Titanic sank, a whirlpool of water sunk all of them into a hole as they disappeared into the deep. And I knew that even their electric equipment to call somebody for help malfunctioned and did not work. Anyway, that is the vision of that. Now, before I released this, I had this. I held on to it for a while, wondering if it was appropriate for me to release some of this. I don't know exactly what all this, the destruction of everybody means. I'm not saying, I don't put my interpretation on it. I'm not saying all of them are going to die. I'm saying there is a possibility some of them could repent and be saved. I don't know. But I do know that the Titanic ship that was represented there, this hidden cabal that has operated in the world all these years, was going to be sunk. And the people that have been swept up in it are going down. I believe some of them will pass. Some of them will die. Some of them will end up in hell, if not all of them. I also believe that many of them will go down by being arrested, or they'll lose their positions, or they'll lose their fortunes, or whatever. But this whole cabal thing is being dealt with by God. This is not just in America. God used this vision to show me certain individuals that I think almost anybody who has any common sense knows are involved in these diabolical things. But the truth of the matter is there was a lot of people there, and many of them, or most of them, were not just Americans. There was people probably from every nation of the earth. And this is going to affect all those nations. in a very positive way eventually. So, I've run out of time. Anyway, share this with your friends if you enjoyed it. God bless you. We love you. Until next time, God bless.